Am I there? That is all the Christmas music you're going to get today. You heard like one bar of Christmas music. There's a lot of Jonathan today. I've been looking forward to this morning because my name has been on the preaching calendar for a couple of months on this date, and I've been looking forward to it, and this was not my plan of how it was going to go. And I had a worship leader lined up, and I'm excited about what I get to share with you guys today. But I had a worship leader lined up, and as I am looking at a message that is truly, really just kind of a one-off message about kind of the mission of Canyon Springs, the purpose of Canyon Springs, it's about the one. And thinking about this whole idea that it's not about you, I get a text from my worship leader saying, hey, I have no voice, yesterday morning. And so we put it together, and I've kind of been looking forward to doing an acoustic day, but not on a day where I was going to be here by myself. So, and I instantly just trust that's the Lord's doing. I instantly had to just go to, I sent out some texts trying to get some people, and I just trust this is the Lord's doing. He's got something for us, simplifying what we're doing. And so I threw out this idea to Jack a few months back. I said, hey, let's maybe between series, let's just revisit this idea of it's about the one, because I feel like that's going to sound a little different depending on who's given the message. From my perspective, it's going to be a little bit different from Leslie's perspective or from Chad's perspective of what that truly means. The basics of it are the same, but maybe a good reminder to keep coming back. And so he said, okay, you go first. So here we are. We are going to be in the book of Matthew, chapter 14. If you have a Bible, chapter 14, book of Matthew, we're going to go through a story that is fairly familiar probably to most of you. Well, if you've been around church or been around the Bible, you may be familiar with this story. Before we jump in, let's pray, and then we'll pick it up. Lord, thank you so much that you have invited us into this place again and again and again. You invite us back. We don't always come. We don't always respond. But every time we do respond, you speak. We trust that you speak. You speak when your word is open. You speak when we fellowship with people in this place. You sometimes speak things that comfort and encourage, and sometimes you speak things that challenge and irritate. Lord, but you speak nonetheless every time we come. And so we pray this morning again expectantly that you will speak to us, that you will show us something. Lord, I pray that every person who's come into this place today, that none of them would feel that their time was wasted, but truly that you would speak something, whisper something, more than my words, but let it be your words that speak to their hearts. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we're going to be in Matthew chapter 14, and we're going to look at starting in verse 22. But what we're going to look at today is that it's about the one, and looking at that whole idea, it's about the one, starts with this idea that if it's about the one, then it's not about the other one or the other thing or what competes with the one. And really, that's the thing that we're looking to do is get clarity on who this is about. This whole thing, whether it be the ministry you're called to, the life that you're living, the Christianity that you're walking in, what is this about? And so we're gonna start. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a background of what just happened before we get to verse 22. So Jesus just fed 5,000 people. Okay, no. Jesus just fed 5,000 men and an unknown number of women and children. So people speculate, 10,000, 20,000, we don't know. A lot of people there. He just fed them miraculously with some fish and some bread that was enough to sustain maybe one person, but he fed thousands. At this point, the crowd is excited about Jesus. This is revival time. People are excited. Church will be packed. If they hold a service, everybody's ready to stay. They are excited. The book of John tells us, so this story is 3 times found in the Bible, very similar to this story that we're going to look at. And in the book of John, it tells us that the people were ready to take Jesus by force and make him king. I mean, he was all-time popularity at this moment. His ministry was thriving. The people wanted to take him, make him king. And so the first thing that I want to note, even before we start reading some of the text, is this: it's not about the crowd. Jesus understood that it was not about the crowd. And so he will dismiss the crowd when we get into our text. But here's what we see. The crowd, when we know from Scripture, when we know from life, the crowd is easily swayed. Easily swayed. Look at political polls, right? They up and down. Look at businesses, stock market, up and down. They I don't know what happened after Tesla introduced that ugly truck, but those things up and down, up and down. Here, I was thinking about this. I was like, what? These are the things that come to my head as I'm thinking through these things. What happened to Meg Ryan? Right, the crowd. You remember Meg Ryan? She was in everything, right? She was the superstar movie star. Or for some of the guys, Jean-Claude Van Damme. What happened to Jean-Claude? Man, he used to make the movies. They'd be in the theater. I haven't seen those guys. The crowd not buying tickets anymore. They have a couple of flops. I'll tell you where they're at, though. I tell you where they're at. Straight to DVD. They're still out there, but the crowd will turn so quickly. The very people that were singing the praises of Jesus when he came into Jerusalem, the final week of his life, were the same people who were chanting, "Crucify him," days later. Jesus was not swayed by the crowd. I get swayed by the crowd. We live in a day where it's all clicks and likes and post a picture and, all right, 50 people liked my picture. And we live in that day where we're swayed by the crowd, but Jesus shows us it's not about the crowd. Oftentimes, following Jesus will make us unpopular. Some people's idea of leadership is figuring out the way the crowd is going and just getting in front of them. Oh, I'm leading. No, you're just in front of them. That's actually the definition of following, but it's not about the crowd. So let's look here. We're going to look at a story. Jesus, he had the crowd. It's not about the crowd. Chapter 14, verse 22, it says this: immediately... This may be my first slide up there. Immediately, he made the disciples get into a boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. So what happened? First thing Jesus does for his disciples in this story is he gives them a calling, gives them a mission, gives them a goal, something to do, a task, a destination, but it's not about the destination. We think Jesus will always take us to bigger and better, right? That's it. Once I start following God, he'll give me a goal. I'll pursue that goal. I'll achieve the goal, and then I'll move on to a bigger and better goal. If you look at this story, Jesus had a massive crowd, 5,000 men and some other people, women and children. He will take his disciples to the other side. And this is what's going to happen. Chapter 14 ends with this, or chapter 14 kind of begins with the story of 5,000 people being fed. Chapter 15 ends with a story of 4,000 people being fed. Jesus had a 20% decrease in his ministry effectiveness by crossing the lake. It's not about the goal. I don't know if you've ever achieved and maybe even and got the goal, obtained the goal. Maybe your goal is a perfect marriage. Does that not seem like an elusive goal? I can't seem to get it. I can't seem to you look around, everybody else seems to have a perfect marriage. I don't have a perfect marriage. Why do they have a perfect marriage? And that's your goal, and you just feel like this is the Christian walk if I could just have the perfect marriage. Maybe it's a financial goal. That maybe I could get out of debt, financial freedom. That's the dream, and maybe some of you guys are close to that. But it's the goal. If I get to that place of financial freedom and perfect marriage, if my kids are high achieving, right? You talk to somebody their kid doesn't yet walk. Oh man, if once they're walking, this will be great. I won't have to carry them all the time. They'll just want to be on their own. Then they're walking, and you have to put those little clips on every cupboard so they don't get in to everything and take it out. And you're just like, man, once they get into teen years, then everything's going to be great. And then they become teenagers, and you're like, oh no, now what? I don't even know if I'm going to survive this. I can't wait till they're 20. Then they're 20, and you're just like, man, I wish they would talk to me. And then they have their own kids. And then sometimes, man, some of you guys have experienced this. Now your kids, they have marriage issues. issues and kid issues. And it just comes back around. The goal itself is never going to be enough. Now, that doesn't mean that the goal doesn't matter. I think that the goal does matter. But it won't bring us the peace and fulfillment that we're after. High achieving kids, maybe it's a promotion at work. The goal, God maybe called you, do this thing, work hard in this place, and that's your go to the other side. Maybe it's just good health. I remember my mom telling me a long time ago when I was a little kid, I was kind of driven, and she said, "You're never going to be perfect." That just deflated me. I didn't even realize until that moment. I actually thought, at some point, I will be perfect. It's not about the destination. So what do we say? If it's not about the destination, then, that's actually a common phrase. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? Well, guess what? It's not about the journey. Here we go. After he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And when he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. It's not about the journey. See, we think, maybe we thought this at one time. If I follow Jesus perfectly, man, it's going to be smooth sailing. I'm going to go where he calls me to go. I'm going to do what he calls me to do. And I'm just going to sit in the boat, and he's going to take me places. If he tells me to go to the other side, the wind's going to be at my back. I'll be there in no time. But that's not what happened. Matter of fact, in Mark's gospel, it tells us that they had to row, that the wind was against them. They were not sailing. By the time Jesus looked up and saw the boat, they were 4 miles out, and they had been rowing. Oftentimes, it feels like when I start following God's plan for my life, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to do what you've called me to do, Lord. It feels like the wind's against me. You ever feel like that? Like the wind is against you. The journey is going to be hard. God, you told me to give my money, and now I'm broke. God, you told me to stop drinking, and now none of my friends will call me, and I just want to drink. God, you told me to go to Africa. Anybody go to Africa just recently? Any of you guys? No, they're sleeping in. They still haven't caught up. Oh, there we go. We got one in the back. And I got sick, right? Anybody? That's some of their story, right? I mean, I went on the mission field. I was serving orphans and widows like you called me to do, and then I got sick. You told me to bring this child into my home, and now my heart is broken. I've seen that. That's happening in this church. People obeying the voice of God, and it is rough. It is difficult. You told me to love my wife, and she hates me. This is all I got about the journey. If your journey is hard, I just want you to know this: Jesus sees it. He's watching. He's waiting for an opportunity. He wants to intervene. He will. This story is not over right here. We just started in these verses. He's watching. I love this in Mark 6:48. I don't think we have it on the screen here. This is again telling the same story. It's a parallel account. It says this, and he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. Jesus on a mountain with the Lord looking out, and he sees the people he sees the disciples in the boat. He sees them rowing. He sees the wind is against them. He knows the story that's about to follow, but he's allowing this moment to happen. He's allowing the trial to happen. His ways are not my ways. I can't figure out why he does it sometimes, but he's allowing it to happen, knowing that he wants to jump in. He's going to intervene at some point. And then here we go. And it was the fourth watch of the night, verse 25. It was the fourth watch of the night, and he came to them walking on the sea. No big deal. We've heard this story so many times, most of us. That's not even a big deal. He came to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." So here's, as I'm looking at this is what I got. It's not about how we feel. It's not about how we feel. There we are, we're tired. You ever notice when you're tired? When you're tired, you get emotional. When you get emotional, you start seeing things that aren't real. We'll look at that a little bit more in a second, but here's the thing. It's not about how you feel. And here's my, maybe something somebody needs to write down. Don't let your fear interpret the situation. They were terrified. They thought it was a ghost. When your fear interprets the situation, you're going to get the situation wrong. You start filling in the blanks, right? You go to WebMD. Oh, I got a cough. I wonder what that could be. Oh, no, I'm dying. Right? WebMD. Here's one. This is maybe us taking it a little too far. I started going down this road. My fifth grader's struggling with math. Anybody got a fifth grader struggling with math? I can't help her. She's way beyond me already. But she's struggling with math. Fifth grader's struggling with math. She's probably going to get behind. That's just it. She's going to get behind. If we don't stress her out over this math stuff, she's going to get behind. And what's going to happen? Then she's probably going to flunk out of school. That's probably what's going to happen. She'll never graduate. If she flunks out of school, she won't be able to get a job. She's going to turn to a life of crime, and then it's prison. And then that, right? That's what happens, man. It's like you start filling in the blanks. I was listening to this podcast. There's this weird girl on a podcast the other day, and she was talking about the way that she was a single lady, and she says the way that she knows if a guy likes her is if he watches her Instagram stories. And so she freaks out if he stops watching her Instagram stories. So if you guys know, you go on Instagram and you got stories, and it'll tell you who has seen your story. And if the guy she likes has seen the story, then he must be interested. And I tell you this, the guy has no idea that that's even happening, but she's looking, oh, he doesn't like me anymore. And she's filling in the blanks with the reason why he's no longer looking at the stories on Instagram. Maybe he's just not on Instagram that day or that month, or maybe he's on vacation. There could be so many other options, but we love to fill in the blanks with our fear. Worst case scenario before it's ever even happened. It's not about the way we feel. Verse 28, carrying on. Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. So Peter got out of the boat, and he walked on the water, and he came to Jesus. I tell you this, if you guys know what's going to happen next, I'll tell you this, that's where Peter wants us to stop reading right there. Peter got out of the boat, and he walked to Jesus. Now, I want to pause here because this is my favorite. Did you pour into a certain group of people, a certain people? That's where the excitement is. Well, I'm not gifted at that. Even better. But I can't walk on water. I don't have that ability. I see Jesus has that superpower, but I don't have that superpower. But yet Peter, I love this. Here's one of the things that I love about this story. Getting out of the boat was Peter's idea. I love that. That Peter is in his moment of security. He looks out at Jesus and he's like, can I have some of that? I want to walk on the water. If it's you, Jesus, I will step out. I will take this step. I love that this was Peter's idea. Here's why. 11 out of 12 people, statistically speaking, will stay in the boat. But not Peter. He was just one of those types of guys. Here's one of the things that I love about this miracle right here, this thing. This is a useless miracle. That's why I like it. This is worthless. Nobody's getting healed. It's not a bad situation getting better because of what Jesus is going to do in this moment. It's simply a guy in a boat stepping out of a boat. That's all it is. In the middle of the ocean, and nobody's there to see it except for 11 guys who are scared to death. That's all that's happening. There is no reason for this miracle except for one thing. This is an adventure miracle. I like adventure miracles. I'm glad that it's in there. I'm looking for that kind of stuff. Months ago, I got to give a message about Jonathan in the Bible. And one of my favorite things is Jonathan and his armor bearer just getting up one morning before the rest of the soldiers. And Jonathan turns to his armor bearer, and they're like shorthanded already. They don't even have enough weapons for the armor bearer to carry one. He's just carrying Jonathan's weapons. And he says, hey man, I don't think God needs an army. Let's go see if he'll deliver these Philistines into our hands by ourselves. And so 2 guys went and took on an army by themselves. That's exactly the same thing. Let's see what happens when we step out of the boat. It's an adventure miracle. All right. But you guys know what happens if you've read any Bible before. Verse 30. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. You know what happens when you step out of the boat? You sink. You will sink. At some point, I mean, you might have a little bit of success, and then you will become desperate. You will realize, I can't do this, and you will find yourself sinking. But here's the word. It's not about the wind. I think we make Christianity too much about the wind. I'm going to explain that. First of all, I want to say this. If you can see the wind, look what it says. When he saw the wind, if you can see the wind, it's in your imagination. You can't see wind. It is invisible. You can see the effects of wind. You can see waves, and you can say, oh, there must be wind because there is waves. But if you can see the wind, it's in your imagination. I feel like we make things way too much about the wind, and I'm gonna break that down. We focus on the problem. We spend a lot of our time focusing on the problem. We will sit around and I think that there are times. But we will sit around in our small group. Sometimes this is good. And we will talk about the problem. And then we will talk about how to not sink. But does the solution ever come back to, we have God before us. We have the power of God to walk on water, and we're discussing how to not sink. I was told of some of the, oh man, I'm not going to unpack some of it, but I wrestle if all we're doing in our time is trying to sin less, trying to sink less. When I look at you, and when I look at our youth, when I look at the years ahead and the health that we have and the opportunity before us, I see we have the power to walk on water. We have the power to do anything. We can change the world. We have the power to take ground for the kingdom. God is with us. He will do things through us. And some of you guys are right in the middle of that and experiencing that, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But some of us get so caught up with, am I still sinking? How do I not sink? And I suggest that perhaps it is that because we've made the main thing the waves, that's the very reason we're sinking. That we've made the whole goal self-help. We look at it where our Christianity is boiled down to, I need to yell at my kids less. I need to stop fighting with my spouse. I need to stop looking at internet pornography. I need to get out of debt and start spending my money better. And we make all of our focus waves. And all the while, right in front of us, there's a man standing on top of the waves. And for a moment, we stood there too. But when we saw the wind and we saw the waves, we started to sink. But I love the way that story ended. He cried out, he said, Lord, save me. This is going to happen. Every time you get out of the boat, you're going to sink. And when you sink, that's the moment. And we find that's usually the place of victory in our lives. Is that moment when we sink is also the moment when we scream out, Lord, help me. And that is the moment he reaches down and he picks us up and he puts us back in the boat. It's the sinking that causes us finally to understand where the power comes from. And he reaches down and he picks us up and he puts us back in the boat. It's not about the wind. Verse 31. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and he took hold of him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Here's what I think. This whole story was to get to this moment. The whole story, the crowd and leaving the crowd, the calling to go to the other side without Jesus in the boat, the goal that was set, the journey that they were on, the waves pushing against them, making it difficult. They're tired, they're rowing, they see the ghost, or so they think, and then they realize it's Jesus. Peter getting out of the boat, looking at Jesus, walking on the water just for a moment, sinking, crying out for help, grabbing the hand of Jesus, winding back into the boat. All of that for this purpose, to sing this song, "Truly, you are the Son of God." You see, these guys were all in on worship in this moment. They were all in. There was none of them like, "I like the King James English better. You're singing too loud, Peter." You know it's Peter who is singing too loud. There was none of that. It was truly full on for Jesus in this moment. They were like, "What? Wow, what just happened?" This whole story came to this moment, that it's about him. It's about the one. All the other stuff is for this verse. He pulls them up. "Why did you doubt?" And notice the wind ceased. They're going to get to the other side. All of the other things are going to be fulfilled. But it's about the one. The whole purpose is that we might see him. We stop listening to the crowd. Why? Jesus says, "I am the truth." Not just he tells us the truth, he says he is the truth. We set the goal because he is the destination. He's the one we're trying to get to, the one we're trying to please. All of our purpose and fulfillment is found in the destination, that is in knowing him. The Apostle Paul was so desperate to know Jesus. He says, "Oh, that I might know him and the fellowship that comes through suffering." What? That's not what I want, Paul. But to truly know Jesus was going to come through pain, was going to come through suffering. Paul was crazy. Paul was like, his thing was to live as Christ and to die as gain. "No, Paul, I'm going to distance myself from you. You're a little crazy." But that's Jesus is the destination. We take the journey. He goes with us. I love it. Jesus says, "I am the way." I am the way. "Lord, how do I get there? I know you're telling me to travel. I know you're telling